Senator Seselja.
Thank you. Can I start by offering my condolences to the family of Reza Barati and echoing the condolences that the government has expressed for this tragedy. Can I also congratulate Minister Morrison, because I join with other coalition members in rejecting the premise and the intent and of this MPI that we're debating today. Minister Morrison, in very difficult circumstances, is doing the job that the Australian people asked him to do and that the Prime Minister has asked him to do, and that is to regain control of our borders and to stop the flow of illegal boats. And Minister Morrison is doing that job in very difficult circumstances, despite the protestations of some of those opposite. So I think we should actually take the time to reflect on the fact that the job of stopping the boats, stopping the drownings, is actually something that is now underway. And I think Minister Morrison deserves praise for that, rather than many of the false criticisms that have been tossed around by particularly the Greens, but also by members of the Labor Party. Let's go to the substance of this issue. The facility on Manus Island was established by Labor. It was established with bipartisan support from the coalition. There was a disturbance with a tragic death at the end of that. The minister gave information as it arose, and where he was advised that information was incorrect, he corrected the record, giving constant updates in relation to the information that was coming. And the government, as has been stated already, has commissioned a review by Robert Cornwall which will look into all of the circumstances of this tragedy. Now, unlike some of those opposite, particularly Greens, we won't be prejudging that investigation. That investigation should be allowed to take its course. It should be allowed to take its course. Now, but what I won't do is allow the Greens to lecture the coalition on compassion and effective policy in this area. I won't accept that, because the result that we've seen, I'll go to what Senator Hanson-Young said at the start of her address, where she said she wanted to raise the tone. She wanted to raise the tone. Well, I agree, we should raise the tone. We should raise the tone from the likes of Senator Milne's statement that he was murdered. Raise the tone from the likes of Adam Bandt's statement saying we killed him. We should raise the tone. We should raise the tone from what we hear constantly from those opposite. We should raise the tone from Senator Hanson-Young's statement in response to deaths at sea, where, when asked whether she took any responsibility, she said, "Of course not. Tragedies happen, accidents happen." How simple it was when the Labor Party and the Greens were running things and 1,100 people drowned. Senator Hanson-Young's response in those circumstances was tragedies happen, accidents happen, she doesn't take any responsibility. I think we should raise the tone, and we should... Well, it's interesting, isn't it? No responsibility for the policies that you supported. No responsibility whatsoever. I agree with the former Minister Tony Burke. I agree with the former Minister Tony Burke when the Labor Party belatedly acknowledged that the policies weren't working. And what he said is this, and I agree with this statement. He said there is nothing compassionate in a policy where you see people drowned at sea. In the first place, if it does have an impact on the number of people risking their lives on the high sea, that is a massive difference, and compassion can't be limited to who is in your line of sight. The people who drown on the way here don't end up giving interviews. No, they don't. Tony Burke was right. There is nothing compassionate about the kind of policies that were pursued for most of the time that the Labor Party was in government and are still advocated by the Greens and advocated right the way through this motion. So we are faced with choices. We are faced with choices. We can go down the path that the former government went down and we can see what results they got. And what were those results? 50,000 people arrived illegally on 800 boats. More than 1,100 people tragically perished at sea. More than 1,100 people, one every 2 days. More than 6,000 children had their lives put at risk by making the dangerous journey to Australia. And more than 14,500 desperate people have been denied a precious resettlement place under our offshore humanitarian program, because under the former government, under the Labor Greens policy, those places were taken by people who arrived illegally by boat. These are about choices. We have a choice. We have a choice as to whether we want to revisit what happened over the last 6 years, with all of the tragic consequences, or whether we implement policies which stop the boats. Because when we stop the boats, we stop the drownings. Now, there are some of those opposite who might want to pretend, as you say, might want to pretend that those 1,100 people who drowned don't matter. Well, I don't accept that. I don't accept that. Just as this one death was a tragedy and we need to get to the bottom of it, and we should have policy responses to make sure it doesn't happen again, those 1,100 deaths were a tragedy. And we're putting in place policy responses to make sure it doesn't happen again. And you've got to ask the question, do the Greens want the policy to fail? It would appear from everything we've heard they do, because at no point in any of their contributions, either in this place or elsewhere, have they said, isn't it good? Isn't it good that people are not risking themselves on that journey in the numbers that they were? Isn't it good? Isn't it good that we haven't seen any drownings for the last few months because the boats are stopping? Isn't that a good thing? Shouldn't we be celebrating that? If you genuinely cared, you would have it within yourself to say, yes, it's a good thing. We'll get to the bottom of this tragedy, but let's stop the thousands of tragedies that we saw under 6 years of Labor Greens government in the past.
Time for discussion has expired.